Budapest, the capital of Hungary, is bisected by the Danube River. Buda is situated on the right bank of the river, where the monument created by Kisfaludi Stróbul Zsigmond stands on the top of Gellért-hegy. The statue was completed in 1947. The names of Russian soldiers that died in the liberation of Budapest are engraved on its limestone base. The main figure, the woman holding a palm, is 14 meters high. There is a Russian soldier standing at the base with a flag in his hand, while on the sides there are two symbolic sculptures. The large fortress upon Gellért-hegy was erected by the occupying army according to the plans of Lieutenant General Immanuel Zita after the defeat of the 1848-49 liberation movement. The citadel offers a view of the whole area of Budapest. Both the mountains of Buda and the bridges of the Danube are visible from here. The Buda castle lies right on the bank of the Danube between Lánchíd and the Elizabeth Bridge. A large settlement was formed in the 13th century when King Béla IV built a castle up on the hill following the Mongolian invasion. When the Árpád dynasty died out, Károly Róbert of the Eger house fought his way to the throne. He, however, moved his seat to Visegád, since Buda had formerly supported his enemies. King Matthias was occupied more with the reconstruction of old buildings instead of building new ones, and supported the influx of the developing Renaissance style. Following the death of King Matthias, the flourishment of Buda Castle ended. The castle was taken by the Turks in 1541, which started the 145-year-long occupation. In 1873, the new capital, Budapest, was formed by the unification of Pest, Buda and Óbuda, which restarted the development of the castle. Church Matthias was rebuilt and Fisher's Bastion was built at the time as well. Today a beautifully renovated funicular leads up on a steep track to the castle, where many museums are found as well. The building of Church Matthias, Church Mary by its old name, began around 1255, and it was placed under the jurisdiction of the Bishop of Veszprém. King Károly Róbert of the Eger dynasty was crowned king in Church Matthias in 309. The Mass celebrating the coronation of King Matthias in 458 and the two weddings of the king were held at Church Matthias. Fisher's Bastion was built between 899 and 905 in new Romanesque style, according to plans by Szulek Frigyes. A beautiful view of Pest opens from this place as well.
Groups of men have lived in Szentendre for 4,500 years. Numerous settlements and cemeteries of the Copper, Bronze and Iron Age are known on this territory. The Illyrians lived here in the Iron Age, followed by the Celtic Araviscus tribe in the 1st century BC. Their site was in Budapest on Gellérthegy. In the 1st century AD, the Romans conquered the territory of Transdanubia and annexed it into their empire under the name of Pannonia, including Szentendre. From this time onwards, the Roman Empire was separated from the Barbaricum by the Danube for 400 years. A Roman camp began stationing here in 176, reorganized in the 3rd century. The number 1 cavalry-bound regiment named Aurelia Antoniana stationed here until the 40s of the century, followed by a section of the Aquincum Legion. The Huns put an end to the 4-century-long rule of the Romans in the 430s. Following that, different peoples lived in the territory until the Hungarian conquest. The Longobards were expelled by the Avars in 568. Szentendre became a significant tribal center under their rule. The first written reference of Szentendre is found in a founding document of the bishopric of Veszprém from the year 1009. The town got its name from the apostle Saint Andrew, who had been the patron saint of the parish church until 1725, which was built in the Middle Ages. In 1318, the capital of Hungary was moved from Buda to Visegád. From that time, the captain of Visegád was the lord of Szentendre. After the fall of Buda in 1541, Szentendre also fell in Turkish hands. In 1595, Szentendre was reoccupied for a short period and it became the possession of the captain of Komárom Castle. 10 years later, the Turkish occupied it again, and the town fell under the rule of the Bey Pegler of Buda. The Danube Band is one of the most beautiful recreational and tourist centers of the country. Its area extends from Budapest to Esztergom, but the territory right of the Danube can be included in it too. Here the Danube breaks its way through the mountains. Its banks are surrounded by the Bergeny and the Visegád mountains. These two mountain groups used to form a single mountain range before the appearance of the Danube, but with time were bisected by the water. Thus was the Danube Band gradually formed. The materials constituting the Visegád mountains are of volcanic origin. There are many springs in it, but these dry out in dry weather. The flora of the mountains is close forest with many meadows and clearings. Under the hills of Visegád mountains, facing the Danube, lies the village of Visegád with its population of 2,200. Since it is situated in the vicinity of the capital and is easy to access, it is considered as a recreational and tourist center of the greatest traffic and spectacles. People lived here in the prehistoric ages. In the Roman ages, an important military base of Pannonia province stood on the territory of Visegád. A Roman fortress was built in the 4th century. At the time of King Stephen I, Visegád was a royal estate and county center, while King András I founded a monastery here for his Russian wife. The Mongolian invasion laid a heavy burden on the region of Visegád mountains as well, for in 1242 the Mongolians plundered all along the Danube. They caused great destruction, but they fled the country in a relatively short time. Subsequently, King Bela IV began reconstruction. Stone fortresses were built all around the country. Besides Solomon's Tower, the fortress in the Visegád citadel was built. The system of walls besides Solomon's Tower extending to the water bastion originates from that time. At the end of the rule of the Árpád dynasty, Visegád grew into a flourishing settlement. This wonderful place was chosen as a new capital for the Anjou dynasty. According to a decision by King Károly Róbert, the royal court was moved here and the country was governed from here. From 1323, Visegád finally became the quarters of the monarch. Royal jewelry was stored here and the royal chancellery moved here too. After the death of King Károly Róbert, the reconstruction of the lower palace was continued by his son King Lajos the Great. The great southern wing of the palace, the fountain and the Gothic chapel was also built at this time. Although Buda became the center of the country again, the importance of Visegád was preserved. The king continued to take care of Esztergom and Visegád. Our conquering ancestors settled along the Danube in the beginning of the 10th century AD. Grand Prince Géza built a palace surrounded by strong walls upon Várhegy in Esztergom, and from 972 this settlement was the site of Hungarian rulers. Esztergom is the center of the Catholic Church of Hungary. King Stephen, who had the palace extended after the death of his father, was born here. He had a cathedral built on the northern side of Várhegy, which was named after Saint Adalbert. Esztergom became a political center and the primary city of Hungary. Later, Székesfehérvár became the site of coronation, but the act of crowning remained the task of the Archbishop of Esztergom. The economic significance of this beautiful city on the Danube bank also grew. It became a center for merchants and the most important money exchange site. At the end of the 13th century, King Béla III had the royal palace of Esztergom reconstructed and extended. The Mongolian invasion hit the region of Pilis and Visegád mountains too. Esztergom was also destroyed, but the castle was not occupied. Buda Castle, having been constructed, became the capital. At the end of the Middle Ages, Esztergom was one of the largest cities of Hungary. The basilica is situated upon the 157 meters high plateau of Várhegy in the place of old St. Adalbert's Church. The classical style building is visible from distant locations of the region too. It is the largest church in Hungary, 118 meters long, and it was 34 meters high. The construction of today's cathedral began in 1822.
Györ can be found on the northern part of Kisalföld at the mouth of Rába, Rápca and the Danube in the center of the Györ basin. The oldest findings come from the Stone Age. The inhabitants of that time were agricultural and stockbreeder people. They lived in huts dug in the earth. The people of the late Iron Age were good locksmiths and potters, and they lived vivid trade life. They had agricultural tools, iron weapons, and then even coined money from the gold penned from the Danube. In the first few decades 80, Roman conquerors hounded out the Celts and occupied the whole Transdanubia. They established new roads from the center of Györ, so in this way the city became a trade center. From a monumental point of view, Györ is the third richest city after Budapest and Soprom. There are more than 200 historical buildings, especially within the walls of the fortress, that were built in the 14th century. The first form of püspökvár was built in the 13th century after a bishopric was founded in the city. The permanent form of the city took shape according to the modernizings of the 15th century. Originally, the castle was only a residence. Till 1560, the residence of the bishop, then of the commandant of the city. The Gothic chapel is a precious part of the later built tower of the castle, which was renovated in 1858. The Bishop's Cathedral is one of the oldest churches of Györ. Its foundations comes from the time of King Stephen I, but through the centuries it was rebuilt several times. Its sanctuary is of the 12th century. During the Turkish times, it burned down, then in the 1600s, it was rebuilt in Baroque style. The church tower is from 1631. The inside of the cathedral was rebuilt in the second half of the 18th century in Baroque style. In its treasury, a valuable collection is exhibited. The Roman and modern time stone collection of János Xantos Museum was established in the second half of the 16th century in the semicircular bastion of Győr's fortress. We can find carved stores in the courtyard which are the ruins of the fortress's Viennese gate from the 16th century. The fortress of the castle used to include most of the town. Its 6 bastions and the semicircular bastion protected the castle. From there, at the linking corridors leading to the casemates, a Roman stone collection is exhibited. You can see epigraphic relief ruins of an ancient city that were built during the constructions of the 16th century. Soprom is one of Hungary's most beautiful and oldest cities. Because of its closeness to the Austrian border, it is a significant city from a tourist point of view as well. It is a paradise for foreign and Hungarian tourists and for those who are on holiday. The city lies near the Sopron mountains and the Balfi hills next to Lake Fertő. Its highest point is the Magasbért, which goes up to 558 meters. The horseshoe-shaped downtown, belonging to the Baroque period, is one of Sopron's most remarkable sights. It is surrounded by the suburban areas of the city, which also offer many sights. The climate of Sopron is influenced in large measure by the nearness of the Alps that provides a more or less equal climate. The cylinder-shaped fire tower is 58 meters tall. At the place of the original bowed gate, we can enter the main square of the city through a narrowed gate called the Faith Gate. The main square already stood in the 1300s. It was mentioned as Platz in the old written records of the city. Later, it was named as Főtér, Main Square, Városház-tér, Town Hall Square, and Szent Háromság-tér, the Holy Trinity Square. In 1952, it was named after Beloyanis, but these days it is called Main Square again. The pharmacy house can be found here, which was a present of King Zsigmond. The Storno house, which already stood in the 15th century, can be found in the main square. It was reconstructed a few times because of fire. Its today's form was created in the early 1700s. A memorial plaque says that King Matthias was a guest in this house during 1482-83's winter. Ferenc Storno, who was a painter and restorer besides his chimney sweep profession, bought the house from Count Festetic in 1872. The earliest dug-up findings come from the Stone Age. In this period and later in the Bronze Age, the settlements lay next to Brook Ikwa. Inhabitants of the Iron Age lived in higher areas of Sopron. The Romans conquered the city's environs in the 4th century. They built the road, namely the Ivy Road, that served legions and traders to get to the newer province. Sopron became the trade and administrative center of the adjacent settlements. They began to build the walls of the city only at the end of the 3rd century. The town was surrounded by a wall strengthened by bastions. The more or less calm life of the city was over by the end of the 4th and the early 5th century. The Pannonian settlements were attacked in rapid succession by the enemy aggressors. The rich of the city left their homes, and poor families moved into these houses, hoping that the walls of the city were enough protection for them.
The town of Köszeg lies at the foot of Köszeg mountains between the foothills of the Alps. Here is the clearest air in Hungary. It is full of monuments, historical sites, and it has a great number of foreigners visiting the place. The territory was an inhabited land even in the 6th and 7th century, according to the findings. In 1328 it got the rank of a free royal town. At the age of Robert Károly, the first civils of Köszeg built fortifications. The defensive structures became stronger with the building of the town walls and towers. During the wars, the commanders of Köszeg Castle supervised the defense. The outstanding historical monument of Köszeg is the Jurisic Castle. There used to be a formal building at its place, probably in the 18th century. In 1327, Robert Károly from the Köszeg family occupied the castle, which had many other owners before. He obliged the civils of Köszeg to build a defense system. He promised immunity from taxes instead of this. Lajos Nagy also kept this arrangement, so the architectural development of the town was unobstructed. The buildings of the castle were built for centuries. It was reconstructed and enlarged several times. The construction of the defense system took a long time. First, they surrounded the town with walls and a moat. Later, the towers and the walls of the fortress were built. The statue of Miklós Jurisic stood in the yard of the pre-castle. It was unveiled in 1963 during the castle feasts. In 1528, Miklós Jurisic became the commander of Köszeg, then later for his successes in the Turkish storm, he became the everlasting landlord of the town Köszeg and of the castle. Then in 1616, the sages owned Köszeg. They renovated the castle fully. From 1491 to 1647, the town was a part of Austria. In 1695, it became the possession of the Esterházy family. It was their castle for 240 years. The fire in 1777 damaged the castle seriously. After this, a part of it was demolished and rebuilt. From 1958 to 1963, the monument was restored. During the reconstructions, they tried to save the atmosphere of the castle. Jurisic Square is the oldest square of the historical inner town. It is used to be the market hall. It got its name Town Hall Square, about the town hall. It was the center of the town, a meeting point. That is proved by the houses, still used today, the churches and the statue decorating the square and the well. Most of the buildings are from the Middle Ages. You can still find the impressions of this. The Maria statue standing in the middle of the square was built in 1739. A lower gate tower built in the 14th century stood on the place of Heroes Gate, but it was demolished in 1880. The former lower gate was the most important part of the town's defense system. Its recent name was given after Hungarian soldiers who lost their lives in the First World War in heroic fights. The list of names is saved by a memorial.
Balaton is one of the natural beauties of Hungary. Most part of the country was covered with water in the third geological period. Lake Pannon is one of the remains of that period. Later, most of it became a plain by the work of the stream deposits. This Pannonian sediment became the water-closing stratum of Balaton. After that, volcanic activities began. The basalt hills were created from the lava flows of volcanic eruptions. The most beautiful hills are on the northern side of the Balaton. We can thank these minerals that the Tihany Peninsula remained. As a result of the volcanic afterworks, steaming waters welled up. This was how the world-famous thermal waters and the pool cave of Tapolca were born. In the next geological period, the Ice Age began. The region underwent large transformation during this period. Today's basin was created then. The very long raining filled up the basin, and this is how Balaton came to life. It is about 22,000 years old. Roughly 12,000 years ago, as a result of the general warming up, the water level fell down and the lake almost dried up. Fortunately, later raining filled up it again. Its length is 77 kilometers and the widest point is 14 kilometers. Lake Balaton is a shallow lake and warms up quickly in the sunshine. This is why it became Hungary's biggest and most popular resort. Balatonfüred is Hungary's very important health and holiday resort. Sick people have been coming to the acid fountains of the place for centuries in the hope of recovery. The most famous fountain is the Kossuth Lajos fountain. It used to be suggested against kidney and stomach diseases, but these days it is rather for heart and circulatory diseases. Several hospitals and sanatoriums operate in Balatonfüred. Along the shore, a vast park lies with colorful flowers and trees. There is a beautiful view over the lake from the promenade of the shore.
The most important architectural monument of Tihany is the Baroque Abbey with 2 towers and the adjoining former monastery. Once King Andrew I had defeated the troops of the German Emperor King Henry III, he settled the Benedictines to Tihany and founded the building complex for them in 1055. This was the first time the village was mentioned. Only the undercraft remained from the buildings destroyed in the Turkish times by the beginning of the 18th century. The new Baroque church was built above this between 1719 and 1751. The furnishing of the island's church was carved between 1753 and 1779. Decorations and carvings can be seen in several places. The church's richly carved pulpit is one of Hungary's most significant masterpieces. It is not known what the original church and monastery building looked like, since no contemporary documents remained. Organ concerts are held in the church in the summer.
"2,000 years ago, during the golden days of the Roman Empire, at the southern foot of the Mechek mountain, an already 1,000-year-old Celtic settlement developed a city that the Romans named Sophiana. After the fall of the empire, several different peoples followed each other. What was built by one of those was destroyed by another one. The city, however, resisted the fightings of that time and later of the Turkish rule. The several thousand-year-old city, with its wall of fortress built in the 1200s, is still standing. During the Middle Ages, the settlement was a wealthy trade city. The boundaries of the city included the castle of Bishopric and their environs. In the 14th century, the city underwent a large-scale transformation. Industrial developments began, and King Lajos I founded the country's first university in Pécs in 1367. The four-towered cathedral is one of the ornaments of Hungary's most precious monuments. The length of the enormous building is 70 meters, its width is 27 meters and the towers are 60 meters tall. The cathedral was begun to build during King Stephen I. In the course of several centuries, other establishments were added to it and some parts were rebuilt. Its oldest parts are the crypt, the three aisles, the two western towers, and today's sanctuary. During the Turkish rule, the church was a jami, so the Turks take care of it. In 1631, the southwestern tower was struck by lightning. Ahmed Aga of Belgrade had the demolished tower demolished and the minaret built on the top of it. To prove this, a Turkish script can be seen in the tower. From a monumental point of view, the crypt is an outstanding part of the cathedral with its 25-meter length and 21-meter width. The side walls are decorated with engravings. At the end of the row of columns, a sanctuary can be seen. The center of the ancient city was today's Széchenyi Square. This was the place where the citizens built their first parsonage in the 12th century, named after Saint Bertalan. After the Turkish conquest, Gazi Kasem destroyed the temple and from the stones of the ruins had a splendid jami built. The Turkish building has a 28-meter tall tower and a dome with a diameter of 18 meters. After the Turkish rule, the building was rebuilt several times and got its present form in the early 20th century. Not far from the ethnographic museum, the Jami of Jakub Ali Hassan can be seen. It is Hungary's best known and most significant Turkish monument. It was built in the 16th century, its walls are covered with an 8-angled dome. This is the one and only Turkish temple that has a full minaret in Hungary. Inside of the building, a Turkish time museum can be seen with genuine articles.
Pugac, the outstanding reservation, can be found in the Kiskunság National Park between Kecskemét and Kiskunfélegyháza. Its real value was discovered in the middle of the last century. Pugac is the center of extensive animal breeding. The typical sandy pastures feed the studs and the herds. The undisturbed area is rich in folk traditions and has a considerable tourism industry. The region has a typical flora. There are hundreds of beautiful flowers that can be hardly seen in the high grass. Loudly chirping birds call attention to the bird life of the Puszta. Among others, field-lark, white wagtail, hoopoe, and windhover can be seen here. There are unique insects in the grass too. It is difficult to spot the antlion, but the funnel-shaped burrows betray its presence. It was opened in 1975. The exhibition shows the life of the herdsmen, their implements and costumes. Besides the natural values of the region, the Hungarian grey cow, the Hungarian Mangalitsa pig, the black and white Hungarian variety of sheep, and horses must be mentioned here. After arrival, the tourists can see the horses in the stables, the stud in the open field, and the cows. Beside the picturesque horse show, there is opportunity to ride. The high point of the show is the gallop of the five in hand. A man drives 5 horses when standing on the last 2. The Bugat's Inn welcomes the guests of the Puszta. In nice atmosphere, the visitors can have a rest, nice food and drinks. The building has a thatched roof, and inside there are carved chairs, benches, and an oven, recalling the near past.
Eger lies between the mountains of the Matras and the Bük in the valley of Brook Eger. Its geological position was advantageous for settling down already in the ancient times. The warm spring and the soil, which is partly volcanic origin, favors the wine and fruit growers. The length of Brook Eger is 70 meters. It rises from the lake Balaton, which lies towards a northeastern direction from the city. The city is full of monuments and historical sites and is world famous for its fine and thermal waters. Eger's peerless building is the main cathedral, which was dedicated to Basilica by the Pope in 1970. It is Hungary's third biggest cathedral that was built between 1831 and 1836. In the Middle Ages, another church was standing in its place, but after quite a few reconstruction, it was demolished in the 1820s. Today's building's main facade is decorated with a colonnade. A unique stair leads there, with statues of Szent István and Szent László on the sides, and a bit higher stand the statues of Peter and Paul Apostolis. The temple's inner square is 80 meter long and 40 meter wide. The organ of the basilica was made in the previous century. Since then it has been renovated a few times. You can go and listen to its beautiful sound on a concert if you like. The Lyceum, which is a secondary school for girls, is one of Eger's precious buildings. It was built between 1765 and 1785. Different levels of schools got place in it, for instance theology, teacher training college and the Department of Law. These days it is the home of Kara Esterházy Teachers College. A beautiful library can be seen in the main hall of this building's southern wing. Its furnishing was designed by Jakob Fellner. At the time of its foundation, it already had a 16,000 volume collection. Today, it is Hungary's most precious library, where several rarities can be found. It keeps one of the first books that were printed in Hungary from the 15th century. And other charters, notes of libraries, famous writers can also be seen here. Its ceiling is decorated with a large fresco that shows the Council of Trident. One of Eger's most remarkable Turkish sites is the mosque.
It was built in the early 1700s. The 14-angled building is 40 meters tall. 197 stairs higher, the stalactite-shaped terrace provides a beautiful view over the city. Another site of Eger is the fortress that has a several century-long past. It became particularly famous for the heroic battle of 1552 when a small army corps led by István Dobó reoccupied the fortress from the Turks in a huge struggle. The 1600s were the golden days of the fortress. According to written records, the walls of the fortress included the cathedral, the Szent István church, the bishopric and a few buildings of the canon. The visitors can taste all kinds of wines in the Szépasszony Valley, where several wine cellars and taverns are waiting for the thirsty guests.